I think number one most important thing is take a look in the mirror and you have to decide that your health and your aging is your responsibility. Nobody else's responsibility. You have to want to take ownership. That's your first decision you have to make because all the resources are out there for you. Number one. Second is just move. Just try to get movement in every day. Walking is really underrated. Walking is so good for you. And again, if you're using the continuous glucose monitor, have some pasta and don't walk, have some pasta and go for a 20-minute walk. Look at the difference in your blood sugar. Walking is a very powerful tool.
This is Med Spa Mayhem, the podcast all about the chaotic world of medical aesthetics. From Botox to lasers to IV bars, learn how to tell real versus fake, legal versus illegal, and safe versus potentially deadly. Hear the crazy stories inside the med spa world and find out what questions to ask and how to spot the people cutting corners. I'm your host, Dr. Kate D. Together, we explore the wild west of medicine that is the aesthetics industry. Hi, this is Dr. Kate D, and I'm really excited to speak with my guest today. I'm going to try to not screw up his name, but it's Dr. Rohan Bissoondath, and he is a Calgary-based physician, and he's been doing family practice and aesthetics for a really long time. But more recently, maybe in the last 5 years or so, has really dived into the concept of longevity and what we can do to prevent aging. So I'm really excited to have a conversation today about that. Rohan, thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Hi, Kate. It's great to meet you, and I really appreciate the time and the chance to talk about a newfound passion of mine.
I know. So I'm really excited because who doesn't want to live longer in a healthy way, right? I think that nobody wants to be sick and miserable as they get older, right? So I think a lot of what you're focused on is being your healthiest, best self for as long as possible. Is that basically right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think in that's a quick, easy way to sum it up. As a medical community, we've been able to push lifespan over the past 20 to 30 years. We see people living longer, but that hasn't necessarily translated into living healthier for that time. So we've almost, in a sense, drawn out the period of time that we actually spend not in our best health. It's been a bit discouraging, but at the same time, we definitely do have the opportunity to push our health span out.
Can you explain a little bit about what your program is and what are the main findings that you're basing the whole program on? What can you really do to change that process or slow it down? Obviously, we haven't been able to stop it, but
Yeah, we can't stop it. And there's a bit of a misconception out there as well with what we hear sometimes in people's messaging that we can reverse aging. We're not there on either of those yet, stopping it or turning back the time. But I think there certainly is the opportunity to slow it down, to affect the rate or the trajectory at which we're aging. And we just have to look around to see it. We can see I'm almost 60, so I'll use a 60-year-old, but we can see two or three 60-year-olds and they can look remarkably different. They can look significantly younger, they can look significantly older. But then from a functional perspective, in the way they move, in the way they speak, in the way they mentate and talk and think, they can be widely different. So we certainly know that we can speed up aging, and on the other hand, we can slow it down. And that's exciting for us.
right. So by speeding it up, you might be doing drugs that destroy your brain or something, or in what other ways? Let's not talk about
Yeah.
speeding it up. Let's talk about slowing it down. Yeah. So what are the components of that? What does your practice look like? What's the big picture?
Yeah. And you mentioned that I've done aesthetic medicine for a long time. It's been about 20 years, but just about as long, we've also run a preventive care clinic. And I've tended to keep the two separate because I think in the early days, in the 2007, when we were starting the proactive preventative care clinic, I really didn't want it to be watered down by aesthetics. And I think back then people did see aesthetics as a little bit frivolous, isn't the right word, but just not hardcore medicine. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there
For
really
sure.
has been an evolution for us where when I'm going to meetings these days, whether it's in the States, in Canada, in Europe, we're really seeing a coming together of just people wanting to look better, but also feel better and live better. So in seeing that coming together over the past 5 to 10 years, it's really given me the impetus to focus on a little bit more on longevity. And I think with the rise of digital devices that everybody's wearing these days, it let me see that we have our
We
aura
got our
twins.
Oura rings on, both of us.
Yeah, I feel like when you see somebody with an aura ring, you're in the same club. You have something in common right out of the gates.
Yeah. There are a lot of us now, a lot of people.
And more for sure. And
Mhm.
the device has really evolved well. And that's part of the excitement. This is the next evolution of medicine. And that's really taking a proactive stance and individualizing care. So, not doing your blood test and having your doctor tell you, you're okay, you're good, you're normal. What does that mean? And it means something different for each one of us. We're aging at different rates overall, but also organ wise. My brain might be aging differently than my liver, than my heart, than my lungs, than my skin, than my skeletal system. So, really taking an individual, understanding what trajectory they're aging on right now. Are they biologically older or biologically younger than their chronologic age? So, at 58, I'd like to know my heart is a little bit younger than my chronologic age as opposed to
Right.
being older. So, we're looking
Right.
at,
Which, by the way, for our audience, there is actually a very specific thing on the Oura Ring app. And by the way, neither of us
yeah.
has any investment in this company, but yes. And so your Oura Ring app will actually tell you if you're older or younger cardiovascular age. I think mine says I'm 6 years younger than my age, which for me is not quite enough, but I'm working on that.
I think I'm right about there as well. It certainly has the algorithms are improving and evolving all the time. I was actually just at a conference last weekend in Boston at Harvard, and it was biomarkers of aging consortium. It's a group of individuals working on really identifying what are good biomarkers, validating these biomarkers, so we can be sure that when we're using them to judge our biologic age, that we're getting reliable, reproducible data. So I think when we started looking at biomarkers years ago, they would just give you one biologic age, that you're 58 years old, but your biologic age is 56. We've come to see that's not really a great way to do it. It hasn't been very accurate. It's better that we look at it from a systems or an organ-based perspective, that your heart is aging at this rate, your skin is aging at this rate, really breaking it down and taking a look. And we can identify where your greatest challenges are, your greatest concerns based on your rate of aging or trajectory of various organs, and then make a plan to address those as an individual.
So, what kind of testing do you do? And then with that, what do you do about it? What are the things people can do on their own or in conjunction with a physician like you to actually slow that down?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and it's a great. I like the way you framed it. That it doesn't really make sense to be doing tests or giving people information about something they can't take action on or make changes. We really want to make sure when we're taking a look at someone and taking a deep dive into them that we're looking at metrics that we have an opportunity to impact through changes. And of course, those changes, it's not sexy. I think it comes back to the foundations of health. You are what you eat, couldn't be more true. You are how you move. Movement is so important to us. Healthy, pain-free movement to be able to carry out the activities that we want to carry out in our lives, whether it's just going to work, performing our job, or it's playing with our kids, with our friends, running out to play tennis or golf or whatever the case may be. We want to be able to do it for as long as possible and in a pain-free scenario as much as possible. By identifying where an individual is at and then addressing their concerns, that's certainly our goal. How do we do it? We start off with a good history. It sounds like old-fashioned medicine, but really we learn so much, and you know it, Kate, we learn so much about an individual by understanding who they are, what environment they're in, what they've been through, trying to understand why they are where they're at today. A good, thorough clinical history, followed by a deep dive into blood biomarkers. Typically, when you see your doctor annually, you might get blood tests that involve anywhere from 15 to maybe 20 different blood markers. When we do our blood work, we're taking a much deeper look at an individual, and we're doing anywhere up to 120, 130 different blood biomarkers that we're looking at for any given individual, really trying to understand their various organs, their function, and how well they're doing. That's from a deeper lipid profile to various markers for kidney function, for cardiac risk factors, all the things that ultimately get us at the end of the day. We know our number one concern, of course, is cardiac disease. Number two is cancers. Number three is probably cognitive decline and dementia. And if we had to put number
Mhm.
four on that list, it's probably fragility. We get fragile as we age. I like to
Yeah.
say we allow ourselves to become fragile because it's all a choice.
I like the term fragility because I was trying to think ahead of time, like what I would put in that category. And really, it's your musculoskeletal system, your bone health, and your muscles. And you want to maintain muscle mass and strength and all of that. And I suppose cartilage, which honestly, the best you can do is really protect your cartilage. But,
Exactly.
once that's gone. So, do you focus a lot on diet and exercise and what else?
Yeah. Once we have that full assessment of the individual, which also includes more technology as well, we want to do a full MRI scan when people want to do that. We want to do some limited genetics. Genetics gets a little bit too much airtime, to be honest, when it comes to our health, but there certainly are some fundamental genetics we can look at for individuals. And then to make sure their cancer screening is up to date as well, make sure they've had their colonoscopy or fecal occult blood or FIT test performed. So once we have that full picture of the individual, then yes, we decide what we need to address most urgently and make a plan to head that way. And it's going to include tweaking their nutrition to some point, optimizing their fitness routine from a functional perspective. Easy to say those things. Get your sleep, exercise, eat well. We've been hearing that our whole lives. Doing it is the challenge. And trying to
Yeah.
hold ourselves accountable, hold our patients accountable. I think that's probably the biggest challenge. We see people have heart attacks and they still won't change their lifestyle to prevent the second one.
Right.
So we know that's the biggest challenge we face.
I'm curious, this was down way farther on my question list, but years ago I had done sort of somewhat similar deep dive and had gotten an extra certification in health coaching and stuff.
Yeah.
And but what I found was that people really, or I did not have the ability to inspire people to change their lifestyle, whether it was nutritionally or exercise or sleep or stress. Like so many people wanted more of a quick fix. So how do you find that people are really have huge buy-in, or are you just collecting the people who really are that motivated? Are people really interested? How do you get them motivated?
I think, again, out of the gates, there is a bit of a selection bias because we're attracting people
Mhm.
who are already wearing the Aura rings, wearing the Apple watches, monitoring their blood pressure 24/7, wearing the glucose monitors. Those people who are a bit techy into their health, they just need to have someone there to pull it all together for them and understand the interrelationships of all those different metrics. Yes, we have a bit of a selection bias, but once you get past that, yeah, it is the biggest challenge, finding what motivates people. And I think a big part of that is taking time, spending time with that individual and really trying to understand what motivates them. And we all have different things that motivate us, whether it's wanting to be around to see our grandkids get through university, whether it's to keep traveling for through our lifetime, keep
Mhm.
playing a sport, be there for our partner, because you and I both see it in our practices. You can have the best laid plans, but as soon as one person gets sick in that couple, the plans go out the
Yeah.
door. Your life ends up hospital and doctor visits. So
Yeah.
once we can try and find what motivates that individual, sometimes they're data driven. So turning them onto their data, gamify it, whatever it takes, whatever
Mhm.
motivates that individual, we try to figure it out and then work with them on it.
So, can you get into more specifics about what your nutritional program is, what your exercise program, what are the other components of prevention?
Sure. I find one of the biggest challenges with nutrition is trying to understand the patterns of how people eat, why they eat, and really document it. I think we used to use food logs where people would write down what they're eating and then the dietitian would try to transcribe it and pull out the macro micronutrients. There's so many better tools right now. We're using a tool that's designed by a team in Toronto. An internal medicine doc has come up with an application, RX Foods. And it's what I've always dreamed of. It's where you just take a picture of and there's a few other applications like this out there now. You take a picture of what you eat or drink through the day for a few days, and then AI assisted tools break down, print out a great report. So we have a good understanding of when people are eating, how they're eating, what they might be deficient in. There's always an easy one. None of us get enough fiber right off the top. Then we can take that and put together, along with them, with likes and dislikes and motivations, how we can make changes and optimize their nutrition. And obviously, you're not going to try to change someone 180 degrees overnight. Little changes, little bits at a time. Again, working with what motivates them. It takes, what do we say, 6 weeks for something to become a habit. So you try to say, do this for 6 weeks, and then let's follow up and see if we've accomplished that before we add other things.
So do you focus on like getting enough protein for 6 weeks and then getting enough vitamin D and getting enough?
Yeah.
It's
It's
really,
so individualized.
yeah.
Again, it's taking that full look at that individual, figuring out where they're at, what their goals are, what our goals are for them, trying to find some alignment, and setting our priorities and knocking them down one at a time. The mistake is to overwhelm people, but to take them
Yeah.
try to go from 0 to 100 in too short a space of time. This is just too much. Just like when we assess someone for aesthetics, I'm sure we take a similar approach of, we don't want to overwhelm that naive patient the first time we see them. When we're younger, we get excited. Wow, we can do this, we can do that, we can do 50 different things. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm a mess. I'm not going to do anything.
I think I probably do overwhelm people but what I like to do is explain the basics, the foundation of things so they
Mhm.
understand all the different kinds of recommendations. I feel like if people really understand the basics of it, then that's the scaffolding that everything else fits on. I believe that's the case with nutrition and exercise and lifestyle, but I am not. That's not my thing, so I'm curious to know how you go about that. It sounds like you do have a clientele that's already into it, like, they're already seeking you out, so they're already knowledgeable about a lot of these things. So, do you have what about, the other facets besides nutrition? What about exercise and other things?
Yeah. Exercise. I like to get, we're trying to, words are so important. And people hear exercise and they're like, oh my gosh. So they think of a gym, they think of sweating, not feeling good. We try to talk about movement. Let's work on your
Yeah.
movement. Let's work on your function. Let's work on just how you frame, and different people. You're going to frame something different for an engineer than you would maybe for an accountant and from a lawyer. Everybody digests things in certain ways. So we're always very mindful of our words. But at the end of the day, we want to look at people's movement patterns, make sure they're moving well and that they're going to be moving for life. Sometimes people
Mhm.
have unhealthy movement patterns, the way they stand up, the way they sit down, the way they reach for something. You'll reach
Mhm.
to the back of that cupboard 1,000 times, but one time you'll tweak
Mhm.
your back or your shoulder,
Yeah.
and you're down for a period of time. And it was a movement pattern that was there for years. So again, we've got great tools to utilize. We're utilizing a tool called Dari Motion. It's a markerless movement assessment. It's cameras, and you're in the middle of these cameras, and we're putting you through various movements. And we're getting a lot of data based on the joints and angles and how people are moving. Again, we're not going to overwhelm them. The engineers in the crowd might be interested in that data, all the numbers. At the end of the day, we're going to make little adjustments to how people are moving to keep them healthy. That's one part of it. Strength is obviously, and muscle mass is a big part of it. We're really into function and functional movements that we do every day in life that we want to optimize for people. Unless, of course, people have particular sports or activities that they want to optimize, we can work on that as well. But I think the most important aspect of precision medicine is that the patient is at the center of this program, and they're surrounded by professionals who specialize in various areas, whether it's movement, nutrition, cardiovascular health, cancer prevention. Those are all members of the team who are working for that individual.
Uh-huh. Getting back to the movement assessment thing.
Yeah,
So, if that technology identifies movement that's limited or movement that is potentially risking a disc or some other injury,
sure.
what can you do to change people's motion that they naturally do?
Yeah, it's to help them to visualize it. And again, we have recordings that we can go through of them
Mhm.
moving, showing them their behavior, their movement patterns, demonstrating and putting them through. Just again, it's amazing the little movements that make a difference in keeping your joints healthy. So just showing them, just as you said, showing them the foundations and then giving them ways to work on optimizing movement. But they have to
Mhm.
understand why they're doing it. And it has to be something that's manageable for that individual. But visualizing is so important. I love tennis, and I can be working on something and I think I look like Roger Federer. And then someone puts a video camera on me and I'm like, oh my God, why do I look like that? But it helps me then to understand the movement and make adjustments. The same thing with these movements or the movements we make every day in life.
Sure. So do you have people in your office that specialize in running and other sports and stuff? Like,
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Yeah, we've
that's
got we've
great.
got great folks that we work with that are passionate
Mm.
about what we're doing, passionate about their craft, and are expert in their areas. Whether it's
Okay, so
again, from
basically
movement to cardiovascular disease.
for me to be able to keep skiing and biking for the rest of my life, which is my goal, I really need to
Yeah.
come to Calgary as far as I can tell. Are you opening centers in the States? No?
Well, right now, and that's the goal with this. I think, and again, this is stepping back and looking at the evolution of healthcare. Healthcare is moving out of bricks and mortar. That's the future of healthcare is
Mhm.
health has to be wherever you are, is where your healthcare has to happen. With the
Yeah.
remote monitoring that we're able to do, follow up, just the way we're talking right now, we're able to follow up from a remote perspective. I think initially we've got to get you to Calgary, yes, do your assessment, put you through the paces over a few days, but then we can follow up remotely and tweak things remotely, maybe seeing
Yeah.
you back here once a year, but we can be collecting your data remotely, and that's our goal and our plan.
I think one of the things that's been disheartening for me in my career, early on in particular, is that I felt like in medical school and residency that we were focusing on basically the last few weeks of life. Most of medicine is,
Yeah.
and actually there was a piece of data that I learned in medical school that I don't know if it's the same now, but it's going to be comparable, and that was a third of all healthcare dollars in the United States are spent in the last 3 weeks of life because we're busy trying to prolong the very end. So stop you from dying today. And I have so many stories from that time where I was so miserable because this was not what I wanted to do with my life, but where the resident or the team stayed up all night to keep that person from, and they just died the next day. So
Yeah.
they somehow won in their minds, right? They did something. But I'm like, okay, so we're torturing this person for one more day. Like, I didn't see the point in that. And I just couldn't be part of that. So if I could flip the switch and change what medicine does and say, okay, we're going to help you live a healthier life. And these are the things that you need to know in order to do that. I think that I really can't, I don't live in Canada. And I always think of Canada as being way more wholesome than we are here in the States, but I could be wrong about that. But people's general knowledge of what they should eat. So talk in terms of whole foods and things that
Mhm.
are protein and vegetables and fruit. To me, that's food. And then all the stuff that big science has created, that's like the monster stuff in packaging in the middle of the grocery store. I don't. It's
Yeah.
not that I don't have a treat every once in a while, but to me, that's not actually food. That is something that a scientist sat in a laboratory somewhere and figured out, what can I put in this cracker or this chip or this bar to make you want to not only eat the whole thing, but eat the whole box. And the
Mhm.
scientists figured that out, and then they made that thing, whether it's Cheetos or Mountain Dew or,
Yeah,
like, and the thing is, that's not like food. That's something that someone wants to sell you. And
for
so they
sure.
figured out a formula that like tastes so good in your mouth that you want to just keep eating it and have another bite, and eat the whole bag and eat the whole box. So my advice to people is really just eat real food. And it might take a little longer because you might have to actually cook something, that, and then an exercise, maybe not movement
Yeah.
regimen of moving your body, right? That builds your muscle so that you don't lose muscle mass or build muscle mass up. And that keeps you strong, maintains your bone health. Do you have more to add to that, since I'm not really the.
You're bang on. And I'd love to comment on everything you said there because I think any of us who've been in healthcare for any period of time recognize that certainly towards the end of someone's life, we're not prolonging life, we're prolonging death. And it
Yeah.
becomes painful for us as providers to be doing that. We're not
So
doing
very
anybody
painful.
any favors. Yes,
Yeah.
painful. For the family, it's inhumane to the
Yeah.
patient. And I'm generalizing, of course, right? But that's how it feels many times that we're not doing anyone any benefit. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree. And I like your statistic of where the dollars are spent. The number that stuck in my head is that not, at least in Canada, 90% of the healthcare dollars spent on an individual is spent in their last year of life. And
Yeah,
so
that's
we're similar
interesting.
with where we are at there. And I'm sure a lot of that 90% is in that last few weeks of life, when anyone who's been to an ICU and has any understanding of the
Sure.
dollars of what it costs to be there would
Yeah.
understand why. But I would love to flip that on its head, like you say, and spend that 90% at the beginning of someone's life, setting them up for a lifetime of
Yeah.
health. That's the
Yeah.
preference.
Yeah.
Right now, that curve of health span trails off slowly after about 50, and we slowly lose our health. And then we spend the last 10, I know I'm there.
I
And
know
we
the two of
spend the
us were like,
last,
no.
yeah, but we have a choice, and you look great, and we're doing
Right.
everything we want to do. And then we spend the last 10 to 15 years in very poor health. We want to square that curve. We want to stay
Yeah.
healthy as long as possible, and then a fast drop off towards the end
I think
would be ideal.
that education at the beginning, I think, is really important. I think that so many people, at least we're seeing, I know I don't want to use words that are triggering for people, but we're seeing much higher rates of diabetes because of the, I think, this much higher rates of obesity, much higher rates of poor diet. And we're seeing this it's 10 times what it was 50 years ago, 10 times. And so it's, to me, it's not about fat shaming or whatever, but if you were to
No.
educate people early in their life about what's healthy food, because people in the States, they think that like they can eat pizza and hamburgers and french fries and that's food. And I'm like, that should be like a treat, but
Yeah.
it's not really healthy to eat that way all the time. Everything's a sandwich. I'm like, why do you need bread? It's not that bread is so terrible, but bread is not filled with nutrients. So it's everything nutrients first, right? And I think one really interesting thing that's happening now is with the GLP-1
Yeah.
agonists, that we're seeing people slim down, lose weight. But then it's even more important to focus on, okay, the little food you are eating has to be 100% nutritious or you will not get
Yes.
enough nutrition. So you
Yes.
need enough protein, enough vitamins, enough vegetables, enough fiber to keep you alive. Basically, otherwise you're starving your body, right? And
Yeah.
that's
There's
been a
no question
really,
about it.
yeah. To me, that's been a really interesting phenomenon in the last year or two, is just people are really slimming down, but they're losing muscle with it. And so you
Yeah.
really have to advise people what they have to eat at minimum. And
What they
I
have
just,
to eat and what they have to do, and to develop those good habits. That should be your motivation, is you're
oh,
getting this boost with the GLP. And on that note, again, coming back from this longevity and biomarker conference, the GLPs are very exciting drugs, because just
mhm,
like other drugs that work with the metabolism of sugar, whether it's the SGLT inhibitors like Jardiance, or the carboats that affect the absorption of sugar from the gastrointestinal tract, we're seeing that those medications have far reaching metabolic benefits. So the GLP 1s, now we're seeing maybe it's improving cardiac function over time, decreasing cancer risk, decreasing dementia or cognitive decline risk. Very interesting things are coming out of through these groups of drugs that work on sugar and ultimately affect our metabolism.
yeah, I think they're really exciting. I think they're going to change the health of human beings. I also think that it's going to reduce not, diabetes, it's going to reduce joint replacements, it's going to reduce
For
heart
sure,
attacks
definitely.
if we are able to use them properly and carefully. I think that all of those tertiary complications of our base, I don't know, lifestyle issues, that's what it
Yes.
leads to, right?
Yes.
I just find that encouraging, how do you educate people enough and encourage them enough to actually change what they're doing on a daily basis? Because I think that's really challenging in medicine. We've traditionally never been good at that. We can't
It
even get people
it
to quit smoking.
it is that challenge, but already with what you've given me, you wanna bike and ski. There's our way into your life potentially, and into your lifestyle, and looking for modifications. And you can think of, each patient you have. I have a patient who loves to fly. He has a plane, a couple of planes,
Mhm.
loves to fly them, has to do his medical every year. His goal is making sure he maintains his pilot license. That's his life. So
Mhm.
that's my lever. That's my wedge into seeing what we can do for his lifestyle. You want to
Right.
maintain that blood pressure, got to keep the weight off, got to keep active. We want your vision and your cognition to stay well. So it's trying to find what motivates that individual. And it's a challenge and it takes time and it's a bit of an art. So I think focusing on it and understanding the importance of it helps to guide us in that path.
Yeah. And have you seen in your patients who are on the program benefit also in their mental health in addition to their physical health?
There's no question about it. And we'd be remiss if we weren't turning the focus to mental and cognitive health. When we really think about it, and I read a book and I can't remember the name of it right now, we just can't separate our mental and emotional health from our physical health. They're tied together. It's all centered in our head, literally in our brain. A healthy body, healthy organs, a healthy brain, they all work together. And just making sure we're doing the things we have to do from the fundamentals we talked about, it translates into some degree of mental health. That's the bottom line with that, that we can't separate the two out, physical health from mental or emotional health. They're just by the nature of our bodies, they're tied together. So I think if we're focusing on being physically healthy, we're also engaging in behaviors that contribute to our mental health.
I think for me, I think I learned maybe in college that I felt much happier if I had worked out. So
Yeah,
I started using that as a I'm stressed out. I'm going to go work out now and make me feel better. And I've been doing that my whole life. And I know that if I've gone for a bike ride that day, I'm usually in a way
yes,
better mood. I think that's something that I've tried to teach my kids, like really encourage
for
them.
sure.
They're stressed out about stuff. I have 2 kids in college and one who's applying right now, and I'm like, "Go for a run or go play tennis or go do your thing." And it is hard, I think, as for teenagers when it's like there's that activation energy they need to overcome to actually go do that thing. But once they do it, they're like, "Oh, wow, that worked." So I think that's an important lesson. I don't
Comes
I
back to your comment about where we educate people, educating them early. I have the same thing
Mhm.
with my kids. I don't care how much you have to study. I don't care about the test tomorrow. You need to take 30 to 60 minutes, do something active. The better place. If I'm driving to work, the other drivers are better on the road if I've already done my workout. The world is just a better, I'm more tolerant of things, I think, versus if I haven't worked out. So that's a benefit right there.
Okay, the
Sleep just
traffic in
can't be over.
Calgary must be a little bit worse than I'm imagining. I don't know.
No, it's not that bad,
Okay.
but it still, it makes a difference if I've been active. Sleep can't be overstated, especially again, young people need to get into that habit that you're going to do better on that test tomorrow if you get your 8 hours versus
Yeah.
studying for 2 hours more and only sleeping for six. The earlier we can develop those habits from sleep again to exercise to nutrition, the better off people are going to be over the long term.
Have you found that sleep hygiene has just really suffered since the advent of smartphones? I feel like everyone is staring at their phone. So even in the middle of the night, people wake up and they stare at their phone, and
No,
that's going to
no.
wake you up. Like
Yeah.
that is like going to completely mess up your sleep. And I think people don't either don't realize that or they don't care or they're so addicted to the phone that I don't know. But
It's
that,
tough. It's tough, and that's what the phone has done. It meant to just like the food and the scientists with the foods, they've worked it's not just scientists, it's scientists and marketers. And
yeah,
same thing with our phones and the applications on our phones. They all want your attention, and we know that.
yeah.
And again, it's so hard trying to work with you know it. It's so hard working with the kid, trying to get them off of it, and all you can do is stand firm. You know that no
That,
phones in the room after whatever time. We're taking them out,
Yeah, but
hiding them,
eventually they're
basically.
grown-ups and then you have no
Eventually.
control over
Yeah.
that. Even when they were a little younger, you really have
It's
control.
tough. It's tough.
I do think that knowing that big companies are trying to get your money and your attention, whether it's putting extra salt in the chip or there's this term the New York Times did this big article about food science. This is a number of years ago. This is probably 10 years ago, but they interviewed these food scientists who had worked on these various things, like the person who worked on Mountain Dew, figuring out
Mm,
the amount of caffeine, sugar, and salt to put in Mountain Dew to maximize the amount of liquid you're going to consume.
yeah.
Had this term called something like disappearing caloric content. So
Mm,
when you eat a Cheeto, that just you're eating it, it's a lot of calories, but it like disappears in your mouth and you swallow nothing. And then, oh, and
yeah.
they literally created that on purpose to get you to consume more of it. And I think the same thing with everything designed on your mobile devices to just consume your attention. And I don't think that people realize that the blue light will interfere with your sleep and then therefore interfere with your health. That when it gets dark out, your brain makes melatonin and says, "Hey, sleepy feeling, you should go to sleep." And all that
Yeah.
gets completely messed up if you're staring at a screen. It just doesn't happen.
Yes. And whether people know it or don't know it, it's difficult to change. People know alcohol isn't good for them. They still drink it. The question isn't how can I stop? It's how much is safe. How much can
Yeah.
I drink?
Yeah.
So yeah, knowledge and then action on that knowledge into behavior change. That's the $1 billion question probably. If there was an easy way to do it, if there was a pill for that,
Right.
uh, would be that would be incredible.
I do think that the biofeedback helps. For me, the information from the ring or whatever wearable, if you
Yeah,
actually look at that, you can see that your heart rate is lower if you didn't actually have a glass of wine that night. And
exactly. Yeah,
other things that affect your sleep and the quality of your sleep and stuff, I feel like that is actually helpful. You see that and you go, huh, okay, maybe
yeah.
I can tweak that.
Great. If you haven't done it, if you haven't combined your Aura Ring with a continuous glucose monitor, it's a must because it's
Right.
interesting to see how your activity, your sleep affect your ability to metabolize and manage your blood sugar. Interesting to see how different foods react to consumption at different points in the day. You
Oh,
could
yeah.
eat the same thing at 8 a.m. that you do at 8 p.m., and your body does slightly different things with your blood sugar.
That's so
So those
interesting. I
are
have not.
very interesting. It's a
That
must do it.
sounds really, that maybe is the next thing I'm gonna do. I am very careful about the different things I eat, and I know how it affects your, release of insulin and
Yep.
how that affects your blood glucose. I do think that might be a little bit beyond the scope of this podcast, but I do think it's really interesting to think about
Yep.
because I don't think that people really understand just how unusual the typical diet is in this country anyway, and how that affects your glucose and your insulin and your metabolism overall to really
Yep.
mess you up. Okay. So
Yep.
I think that
Yeah,
people don't,
100%.
because you
Yep.
can't see it or feel it. And so it's really hard to know just how much that is kind of interfering with the natural, normal metabolism that's healthy. I would love to talk to you some more. Maybe you can come back on the podcast another day. But I really was hoping that you could maybe, if there's one or two or a little summary of like advice that you would give to our listeners on what to think about or what to do to prevent aging or to slow it down for them if they can't come to Calgary and see you in your clinic.
I think number one most important thing is take a look in the mirror and you have to decide that your health and your aging is your responsibility. Nobody else's responsibility. You have to want to take ownership. That's your first decision you have to make because all the resources are out there for you. All the information is out there for you. There's so many different podcasts like this one and opportunities to educate yourself. Number one. Second is just move. Just try to get movement in every day. Walking is really underrated. Walking is so good for you. And again, if you're using the continuous glucose monitor, have some pasta and don't walk. Have some pasta and go for a 20-minute walk. Look at the difference in your blood sugar. Walking is a very powerful tool. Movement. Try to eat, you touched on it, try to eat whole foods. As little processed foods and added sugars as possible. Get your 8 hours sleep. Those are the foundations and fundamentals of who we are. And if you're not doing that, it doesn't make sense to look to peptides, to look to the next fad, to look to genetics. We
Right.
need the fundamentals in place before you start moving on to other things.
I totally agree. That's really great advice. Rohan, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. It's been really interesting talking with you. Maybe we can do this again.
I would love it. Thanks a lot for having me. I could talk for days about health and living a long, healthy life. So thank you very much.
All right. And if anybody is interested, we will have links to Rohan's clinic and all the information about him in the show notes. All right. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
If you've learned something and like what we're doing, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating in your podcast app. If you have a question or a crazy story of your own you'd like to share, please send an email or voice recording to info@drkatedee.com. That's DRKATEDEE.com. Or reach us through the website medspamayhem.com. And read the book. MedSpa Mayhem is available everywhere books are sold. Thanks for listening. This has been Med Spa Mayhem with Dr. Kate D. We are so grateful you're listening, and we hope you've learned at least one fun or possibly disturbing fact today. Don't forget to hit subscribe on your podcast app and leave us a 5-star review. And read the book. Med Spa Mayhem is available everywhere books are sold. Links and more can be found in the show notes and on medspamayhem.com.